Please remember we have a dinner with the CEO of Cozy Homes, Uche said, blowing a kiss to her husband before hanging up, or so she thought. She dropped the phone on the bed and rushed to the bathroom to turn off the running tap. When she returned, she heard a voice. Her husband was still talking, but the warmth was gone. His tone was cold, like ice. She realized the call was still active. As she reached down to end it, she heard the one statement that would shatter her world forever. The dinner is at 7. I want her gone the moment we arrive. Make sure it looks like a robbery gone wrong. I want just a single strike to my upper body. Make sure it's a flesh wound. Do not miss your chance. Everything must look perfect. This is African Folktales with Nsinem. Listen to this story where nothing is what it seems. Vivian and Peter had met at Harvard Business School and developed a strong bond that only grew stronger with each passing day. These were not your regular village love stories. This one came with degrees, accents, and expensive suits. After their wedding, Vivian took in, but their joy was cut short when she went into premature labor. Everything went terribly wrong, and within a short time, Vivian's life was hanging by a thread. Their little princess was born 2 months early, but Vivian slipped into a coma that lasted 3 weeks. Peter cried, prayed, and cried again, because at that point, even money could not solve that kind of problem. By some miracle, Vivian survived, and eventually they returned home with their bundle of joy. 8 years later, when Peter's family began pressuring him to have a male heir, he refused to be bothered. Every family meeting, somebody would clear throat and say, "Peter, you know," and he would just stand up and leave. He didn't owe anybody explanation. The truth was, Vivian's womb had been ruptured during childbirth. Peter had already made up his mind. If she survived, 1 child was enough for him. No pressure, no second wife, no nonsense. Uche was the light of her parents' lives. In fact, if Uche said she wanted the moon, Peter would first ask, "Do you want it in dollars or naira?" Though Vivian and Peter were multi-millionaires, their greatest treasure was their daughter. After completing her MBA at Harvard Business School, Uche returned home with a suitor, and that was where the problem started. The moment Peter saw the young man, his expression changed immediately. His hair was in braids, fine, manageable, but the nose ring, that one finished Peter completely. He stared at the boy from head to toe like customs officer inspecting contraband. "Uche, is this a joke or you're actually serious?" he asked under his breath. Because in his mind, this was not a son-in-law. This was a walking billboard. Peter didn't hide it, not even a little. From the moment Uche introduced him, the atmosphere in the room changed. The air became tight, the kind of tight that makes even the air conditioner feel like it's not working. "Dad, this is Cairo," Uche said, smiling, clearly proud. Peter didn't smile back. He simply looked at the young man slowly, from his braided hair down to his shoes, then back up again. Silence. The kind of silence that can make a grown man forget his own name. Peter did not embarrass her, at least not openly. "You are welcome," he said, extending a hand. His tone was polite but cold, the kind of politeness that had distance inside it. Cairo noticed immediately, but he kept his composure and shook Peter's hand firmly. "Good afternoon, sir." Peter nodded once, already withdrawing his hand like he had touched something he wasn't sure about. "Sit," he said. They sat. A few seconds passed. No questions, no warmth, just silence. Uche shifted slightly, trying to ease the tension. "Dad, Cairo just got back from Lagos this morning." "I see," Peter cut in calmly, not even looking at Cairo. That was all. No follow-up, no interest. The conversation struggled for a few more minutes, with Uche doing most of the talking while Peter gave short, uninterested responses. Soon enough, Peter stood up. "Excuse me, I have a call to take." And just like that, he walked out, leaving behind an atmosphere that said everything he didn't speak. Later, inside Uche's room, Cairo sat at the edge of the bed, quiet for a moment. Then he let out a small breath. "I don't think your father likes me," he said honestly. Uche turned to him quickly. No, don't say that. Uche, he gave a small, knowing smile. I've met enough people to recognize when I'm not welcome. She moved closer and sat beside him. It's not that he doesn't like you, she said softly. He just doesn't know you yet. Cairo raised a brow slightly. That's your defense? She smiled, trying to lighten the mood. Yes, and I'm serious. Once my dad gets to know you, he will like you. She paused, then added playfully, in fact, he might even love you more than I do. Cairo chuckled softly. That would be a miracle. It will happen, she insisted. You just have to give him time. Cairo looked at her for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right, for you, I'll be patient. She smiled, relieved, completely unaware of the storm already building around them. A few minutes later, Uche walked into her father's office without knocking. Dad, we need to talk. Peter didn't look up immediately. He finished signing a document, closed the file neatly, then raised his head. If this is about that young man, I already know what you want to say. Uche folded her arms. Go on, Dad. I'm listening. Peter leaned back in his chair. I don't approve. Just like that. No hesitation, no softness. Uche exhaled sharply. You didn't even try to know him. I don't need to. Why? She demanded. Because I have eyes, Peter replied calmly. And what exactly did your eyes see? She shot back. Peter's expression hardened slightly. I saw a man who does not fit into your life. That's not a reason, she said, frustration rising. That's an excuse. Peter leaned forward slightly. You want reasons? Fine. I do not trust him. Uche shook her head. You don't even know him. Then enlighten me, Peter said, folding his arms. That was all the invitation she needed. He owns a record label, Uche began quickly. Not a small one. Top artists are signed under him. He directs major music videos, the kind you see trending everywhere. And he owns an oil well. She stepped closer, her voice filled with conviction. Dad, he's successful. Very successful. Peter listened quietly. Then he let out his soft, almost amused breath. Finished? He asked. Uche blinked. Yes. Peter leaned back slowly, studying her like she had just said something naive. Uche, he said calmly, do you know what you stand to inherit? She frowned slightly. That's not the point. It is exactly the point, Peter cut in. Everything I have built, every company, every asset, every investment will be yours. He paused, letting that sink in. Compared to you, that young man you brought into my house is a church rat. The words hit hard. Uche's eyes widened. Dad, I said what I said, Peter continued, his tone firm and unshaken. You are talking about record label and music videos like you are describing a billionaire. Uche, the level you are on, he has not even started climbing. That's not fair, she argued, hurt creeping into her voice. You're reducing everything he has worked for. I am not reducing anything, Peter replied calmly. I am putting it into perspective. He is not poor, Uche insisted. I didn't say he was poor, Peter said. I said compared to you, he is nothing. Silence fell. Heavy. Painful. You are judging him because of his looks, Uche said quietly. Peter shook his head slowly. No, I am judging him because I see more than you do. Uche swallowed. And what exactly do you think you see? Peter held her gaze. A man I cannot trust. The words lingered in the air. I'm going to marry him, Uche said finally, her voice steady but emotional. Peter didn't blink. Then you will do it without my blessing. That one broke something. Uche stared at him, hurt written all over her face. You don't mean that. Peter's expression remained firm. Try me. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Uche turned and walked out, her chest tight, her mind racing. And as the door closed behind her, Peter exhaled deeply. The hardness in his face faded, replaced by something darker. Peter wasn't going to let his daughter marry an opportunist, not on his watch. But if only he knew that interfering in his daughter's life would cause more harm than good. Days later, Uche could barely contain her excitement as she paced around her room, her phone pressed to her ear. Cairo, you don't understand, she said, smiling from ear to ear. My dad invited you to dinner. Dinner? Do you know what that means? She didn't even wait for his response. He never does that. My father doesn't invite people to sit at his table for nothing. This is it. He's finally coming around. There was a brief pause on the other end before Cairo spoke, his tone calm but thoughtful. Or maybe he just wants to observe me more closely. Uche laughed immediately. You and your suspicions. Relax, okay? This is a good thing. Trust me. Cairo exhaled softly. All right, if you say so. I know so, she replied confidently. Just be yourself. That's all you need. That evening, the dining room was set with quiet elegance. The kind that didn't need to announce wealth. It simply existed. Uche sat beside Cairo, her excitement barely hidden, while Peter and Vivian sat across from them. The atmosphere was calm, almost too calm. You're welcome, Vivian said warmly, trying to bridge the gap her husband had created earlier. Cairo nodded politely. Thank you, ma. Peter said nothing at first. He simply picked up his cutlery. Let's eat, he said. No small talk, no build-up. They began eating. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the soft clinking of cutlery against plates. Uche kept stealing small glances at her father, waiting for something, anything, that showed approval. But Peter's expression remained unreadable. Cairo maintained his composure, calm and respectful, matching the silence with quiet confidence. Then suddenly, footsteps, firm, uninvited. The dining room door opened, everyone turned, and a man walked in, tall, composed, incredibly handsome. Uche glanced at him. The confusion she felt was evident on his face. The room shifted. Because whatever this dinner was supposed to be, just changed. Uzo didn't wait to be asked twice. He stepped in with quiet confidence, like someone who already knew he belonged there. Uche's confusion deepened as her eyes moved from him to her father. Peter was already on his feet. Ah, Uzo, he said, his voice noticeably warmer than it had been all evening. Right on time. Uche blinked. Right on time? You're welcome, Peter continued, walking up to him and shaking his hand with a familiarity that had been completely absent when Cairo arrived. Please join us. Cairo noticed it, the difference. It was impossible to miss. Uche slowly set down her cutlery. Dad, who is this? Peter turned, almost like he had just remembered she was there. Oh, forgive me. Uche, this is Uzo. He gestured toward the young man with a hint of pride. The son of the co-founder of one of our major companies. Uche frowned slightly. I don't think we've met before. Uzo smiled politely. No, we haven't, but I've heard a lot about you. There was something smooth about him, polished, controlled. Peter motioned for a chair to be brought. Sit, sit, he urged. And just like that, Uzo was seated at the table. Dinner resumed, but everything had changed. Peter turned his full attention to Uzo, completely ignoring Cairo, as though he no longer existed. So, how is your father? Peter asked, his tone relaxed, almost friendly. He's well, sir. He sends his regards, Uzo replied. Good, good, Peter nodded approvingly. A brilliant man, very disciplined. Not many people build empires the way he has. Uche glanced at Cairo. He said nothing, just quietly continued eating. Peter went on, clearly impressed. And I hear you've taken over a large part of the business already? Uzo smiled modestly. I'm learning, sir. Trying to expand what he started. That's how it should be, Peter said, nodding. Legacy, structure, vision. Each word felt intentional, directed. Uche shifted uncomfortably. Dad! But Peter wasn't done. You see, Uche, he continued, finally glancing at her. This is what I've always told you. A man must understand responsibility early, not just chasing trends up and down. The jab was subtle, but it landed. Cairo's hand paused briefly on his cutlery, then continued like nothing happened. Uche frowned. Dad, that's not fair. I'm only speaking the truth, Peter replied calmly. Uzo here understands what it means to build and sustain something that lasts. Uzo remained composed, though even he seemed aware of the tension now building at the table. Uche's voice tightened. You invited him here for this. Peter ignored the question completely. Instead, he turned back to Uzo. And your new project, the expansion into oil and gas, I've heard good things.
Uche's eyes widened slightly. Oil and gas. Peter nodded approvingly. That is how real wealth is built. Not noise, not temporary theme. Structure. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Uche looked at Cairo again. This time he looked back at her, and in his eyes she saw it clearly. He understood exactly what was happening, and he wasn't surprised. But Uche, this was the moment it hit her. This dinner was never about acceptance. It was a setup. Uche didn't wait for the dinner to end.
The moment she could excuse herself, she stood up, forced a tight smile, and walked out of the dining room. Her chest was tight, her steps quick, her mind racing. By the time she got to her room, she shut the door behind her and leaned against it, letting out a shaky breath. What was that? She whispered to herself. A soft knock came a few minutes later. Uche, can I come in? It was her mother. Uche hesitated for a second before opening the door. Vivian walked in gently, her expression calm, almost like she had expected this. My dear, she said softly, walking closer. You left the table in a hurry. Uche let out a small, bitter laugh. Did you expect me to stay there and watch that? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Dad didn't even try to hide it. He completely ignored Cairo and started parading someone I've never even met before.
Vivian sighed and sat on the bed, patting the space beside her. Come, sit. Uche shook her head at first, then slowly walked over and sat down, folding her arms tightly. You shouldn't be offended by your father, Vivian began gently. Uche turned to her immediately. Not be offended? Mom, he embarrassed me. He embarrassed Cairo. Vivian nodded slowly. I understand how it looked. I truly do. But you have to remember something. Your father has always meant well, even when he doesn't express it properly. Uche looked away, her jaw tightening. He is not doing this to hurt you, Vivian continued. He is doing it because he is afraid. That made Uche pause. Afraid of what? She asked quietly. Vivian reached for her hand. Afraid of losing you. Afraid of you making a choice that could put you in a position where you might suffer later. Uche frowned. Cairo would never. I'm not saying he would, Vivian interrupted softly. But your father doesn't see things the way you do. He looks at life differently. To him, love is not enough. Uche sighed, pulling her hand away gently. So what is enough? Money, status, connections? Vivian gave a small, knowing smile. Security. The word hung in the air. Your father believes that you should be with someone from a family we know, she continued. A family with structure, history, stability. Someone whose background is clear, whose path is predictable. Uche shook her head slowly. That sounds like a business merger, not a marriage. Vivian let out a soft chuckle. To your father, sometimes it is both. Uche couldn't help the faint smile that tugged at her lips, but it faded quickly. He just wants to make sure you are financially protected, Vivian added. That no matter what happens, you will never lack, never struggle, never depend on uncertainty. Uche looked down at her hands. But I'm already protected, Mom. I have my own life, my own career. I know, Vivian said. But to him, that is not enough. He wants a man who adds to that protection, not one he feels unsure about. Silence settled between them for a moment. Mom, you met Cairo, Uche said softly. What do you think? Vivian hesitated, just slightly, and Uche noticed. I think, Vivian began carefully, that he seems like a good man. But I also think your father sees something we may not be seeing yet. Uche's brows furrowed. What does that even mean? Vivian sighed. It means sometimes your father trusts his principles more than anything else. Uche leaned back, frustrated. So I'm just supposed to ignore how I feel because of his principles? No, Vivian said gently. But you should not dismiss them completely either. Uche went quiet. Her emotions were all over the place. Anger, confusion, hurt. I just wish he would trust me, she whispered. Vivian reached out and brushed her hair back softly. He does trust you. He just doesn't trust the world around you. That hit differently. Uche swallowed hard. And sometimes, Vivian added quietly, that fear makes him act in ways that push you away, even when he is trying to protect you. Uche didn't respond. She just sat there, thinking. Because for the first time, she wasn't entirely sure if her father was just being controlling, or if he was seeing something she couldn't yet see. But in a very short while, both father and child would literally be fighting to stay alive. Cairo didn't call that night. Uche waited, pacing her room, checking her phone every few minutes, replaying the dinner in her head over and over again. The silence stretched into the next day, then the next. By the third day, she couldn't take it anymore. She went to see him. Cairo opened the door, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The warmth that used to sit easily between them was gone, replaced by something heavy, final. "Are you going to keep ignoring me?" Uche asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Cairo sighed and stepped aside. "Come in." She walked in slowly, her eyes scanning the room like something might have changed. But it hadn't. Everything looked the same. Only them had changed. "Cairo, what's going on?" she asked softly. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned against the wall, folding his arms like he was holding himself together. "I think we both know what's going on," he said finally. "No, I don't," she replied quickly. "Because if this is about my dad..." "It is," he cut in gently but firmly. Uche shook her head. "Then forget him. This is about us." Cairo looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his eyes made her chest tighten. "That's the problem, Uche," he said quietly. "For you, it's about us. For your father, it will never be." "So what?" she snapped, emotion breaking through. "Since when did my father decide who I love?" "He doesn't," Cairo said. "But he decides the kind of life you will have." Uche frowned. "I don't care about that." "But I do," he replied. That stopped her. "I care enough not to be the reason you fight your family every day," he continued. "I care enough not to sit at a table where I'm treated like I don't belong, over and over again." "You're overreacting," she said, though her voice was already shaking. Cairo gave a sad smile. "No, your father made it very clear. And the truth is," he paused, "he's not entirely wrong." Uche stared at him. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means your world and mine are not the same," he said softly. "And no matter how much we pretend, that gap will always be there." Tears welled up in her eyes. "So that's it? You're just giving up?" "I'm not giving up," he said quietly. "I'm letting you go." The words landed like a blow. "No," she whispered. "No, you don't get to do that." Cairo stepped closer. "Uche, if I stay, I become the man your father warned you about." "You're not that man," she cried. "Maybe not," he admitted, "but I don't want to become him either." Silence. Painful. Final. "I love you," he added quietly, "and that's why I'm walking away." Uche's tears fell freely. "Cairo," but he shook his head gently. "Take care of yourself." And just like that, he was gone from her life. "Tell me, would you walk away from a man you love because of a parent's disapproval? Share your thoughts with me in the comments. Back to the story. Uche didn't remember how she got home. She only knew that when she walked into her room, the strength she had been holding on to shattered completely. She sank to the floor, her body shaking with silent sobs. Vivian found her there. "My baby," she whispered, rushing to her side. Uche leaned into her mother, crying. "Mom, he left." Vivian held her tightly. "I know. It hurts," Uche cried. Vivian closed her eyes briefly. "Sometimes, what hurts the most is what saves us. It doesn't feel like it, I know. But one day, you will understand. This is for the best." Days turned into weeks. The house slowly returned to normal, but Uche didn't. She became quieter, distant. And then, Uzo stepped in. It started gently. A call here, a message there. "Good morning, Uche. Don't forget to eat. Take a break." At first, she ignored him. Then she replied. Then she smiled. Uzo was patient, careful, intentional. He didn't rush her. He understood her. Slowly, he filled the space Cairo had left behind. He remembered small details. The way she liked her coffee.
The thing she said once and forgot. And for the first time in weeks, Uche laughed again. One evening, under soft lights and a quiet sky, Uzo took her hand. "I know you've been hurt," he said gently. "I just want a chance to build something real with you." Uche looked at him, her heart cautious but open. "I will never make you feel unsure," he added. And slowly, she nodded. When Uzo approached Peter for his blessing, it was everything Peter wanted. "Sir, I want to marry your daughter," Uzo said. Peter looked at him, then nodded. "You have my blessing." Plans began immediately. The engagement was breathtaking. Soft lights, elegant decor, family and friends gathered. Uche stood at the center, beautiful, composed. Uzo went down on one knee, holding out the ring. "Uche, will you marry me?" Time paused. Then she smiled. "Yes, yes, I will." Applause filled the air. Her parents beamed with pride. Everything looked perfect. Everything felt right. But deep down, in a place she couldn't explain, something still felt unsettled. The wedding was everything people would talk about for years. Lagos stood still for it. The hall glittered like a palace, crystal chandeliers cascading light across gold-trimmed tables, fresh white roses lining every aisle, a live orchestra filling the air with soft, powerful music. Influential guests, business moguls, politicians, everyone was there. Uche looked like royalty in her flowing ivory gown, every step she took graceful, every smile perfectly placed. Uzo stood at the altar, eyes fixed on her like she was the only person in the world. When she reached him, he took her hands gently, his touch warm, steady, reassuring. "You're breathtaking," he whispered. She smiled, the kind of smile everyone expected. But just for a moment, a brief fragile moment, her gaze drifted past the crowd, and she remembered Cairo. The way he used to look at her, the way his voice softened when he said her name, the way everything felt simple, real. Her smile faltered, just slightly. No one noticed, except her. "Uche?" Uzo's voice pulled her back. "I'm here," she said quickly, tightening her fingers around his. The ceremony went on. Vows were exchanged, rings were placed. Applause thundered through the hall as they were pronounced husband and wife. And just like that, a new chapter began. The reception was even more extravagant. Champagne flowed endlessly. Laughter echoed. Cameras flashed. Uzo never left her side. He held her close during their first dance, his hand firm at her waist. "You're mine now," he murmured softly into her ear, his tone filled with something deep, possessive, but gentle. She leaned into him, trying to believe it, trying to feel it. But deep down there was something about Uzo that terrified her, but she just couldn't understand why. Because Uzo seemed perfect for her too. Perfect.
That night, after the guests had gone and the noise had faded, Uzo showed her a different kind of love. Soft, intentional. He brushed her hair back carefully, like she was something delicate. He kissed her forehead before her lips. He listened when she spoke, even when she didn't say much at all. "I'm going to take care of you," he promised. And he did. In the weeks that followed, Uzo became everything she needed him to be. He sent her flowers, sometimes twice a day, left handwritten notes where he knew she would find them, took her on quiet getaways away from the noise of the city. He learned her silences and filled them with comfort, not pressure. Slowly, Uche began to breathe again. She laughed more, she slept better. She allowed herself to settle into this new life. And for the first time since Cairo left, she stopped looking back. 3 months passed like a dream.
Until one morning, everything shattered. It started with a phone call. Uche was in the living room when her mother's scream tore through the house. "Uche!" She ran. Vivian stood in the middle of the room, trembling, her phone shaking violently in her hand. "What happened?" Uche asked, her heart already racing. Vivian couldn't speak. She just handed the phone to her. A voice came through, cold, unfamiliar. "We have your husband." Uche's stomach dropped. "What?" "Peter Okafor is with us," the voice continued. "If you want to see him alive, you will do exactly as we say." Her hands began to shake. "Please, please don't hurt him." "Then listen carefully." The line went dead. Panic erupted. Calls were made, security contacted, money arranged. Uzo stepped in immediately, taking control, speaking to people Uche didn't even know existed. "We'll get him back," he assured her firmly. But something felt wrong. The hours stretched into days. No second call, no instructions, just silence. At first, there was hope.
"They are playing the waiting game," Uzo said, pacing slowly, phone in hand. "Kidnappers do this sometimes. They want to increase pressure." Uche clung to that explanation. She had to. Her mother barely slept, jumping at every sound, every phone vibration. The house was filled with security personnel, hushed voices, and tension so thick it felt suffocating. But the call never came. Day 3, day 5, a week, still nothing. "Why haven't they called again?" Uche asked one night, her voice fragile, her eyes fixed on Uzo. He didn't answer immediately, and that silence terrified her more than anything. The police got involved. Investigations began. Questions were asked. Roads were traced. Phone lines tracked. Nothing. It was like Peter Okafor had vanished into thin air. No ransom demand, no trace, nobody. Just gone. Vivian finally broke down completely. "He can't just disappear," she cried one evening, clutching Uche's arms. "Your father is not a man that disappears. Someone knows something." But no one did. Or at least, no one was talking. Weeks passed. The house changed. The power her father once carried began to fade from the walls. Meetings stopped. Calls reduced. People who once came running now sent brief messages. Uncertainty replaced authority. Uche felt it. Everything felt unstable. 2 years passed, and still nothing. No calls, no ransom, no trace. It was as though Peter Okafor had vanished from the face of the earth. At first, there had been hope, then patience, then desperation. Now, there was only silence. His kinsmen could not take it anymore. "A man cannot remain in the spirit world without honor," one elder said firmly. "We must lay him to rest, even if all we have are memories." And so they insisted. A funeral would be held. Not because they had found him, but because they had given up finding him. At the funeral, there was no coffin, just an empty space. A symbolic farewell. Uche stood beside her mother, dressed in black, staring at the hollow center where someone should have been. It didn't feel real. How do you grieve someone when you don't even know where they are? When there is no body, no proof, no closure. "I don't think he's dead," Uche whispered suddenly. Vivian looked at her, eyes red and tired. "I would feel it. Something is wrong. This doesn't make sense." Uzo stepped closer, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "We have to accept reality," he said softly. But Uche slowly turned to look at him, and for a brief moment, something in her expression changed. Not grief, not denial, something else, suspicion. Because deep down, this didn't feel like an ending. It felt like something unfinished, something hidden. And as she stood there, staring at the empty space meant to represent her father, one thought echoed loudly in her mind. If there's no body, then what really happened to him? Life had to go on, and as Peter's only heir, she was summoned to attend a board meeting. The boardroom felt colder than usual that morning. Uche sat at the far end of the long mahogany table, her fingers interlocked tightly on her lap. The walls that once echoed with her father's commanding voice now seemed to press in on her,
heavy with expectation. Every seat was filled. Men and women who had worked under her father for years, decades, now sat watching her, waiting. The chairman cleared his throat. As you all know, the unfortunate disappearance of Mr. Peter Okafor has left a significant gap in leadership. A pause. Respectful, careful. But the company must move forward. Uche swallowed. The board has come to an unanimous decision, he continued, turning slightly toward her. Madam Uche Okafor Uzo, you will assume the position of acting director of the Okafor Group, effective immediately. The words landed, but they didn't settle, not properly. Acting director. Huh? A soft murmur of approval moved around the room. A few nods, a few polite smiles, but Uche felt none of it. Her heart pounded loudly in her ears as all eyes shifted to her. She forced herself to stand. Thank you, she began, her voice calm, but only just. I will do my best to uphold everything my father built. It sounded right. It sounded strong. But inside, she felt like she was standing on unsteady ground. The meeting continued. Figures, projections, strategies, but most of it blurred together. Because for the first time in her life, there was no one to turn to at the head of the table. No one to take over. No one to guide her. Just her. In the weeks that followed, it only got more intense. Calls came in non-stop. Emails flooded her inbox. Invitations, no, summons arrived daily. Meetings with partner companies. Meetings with investors. Meetings with firms her father had stakes in across industries she barely understood. Oil, real estate, logistics, media. Each one carried weight. Each one carried expectation. And one by one, they were handed to her. You're now the primary representative of your father's shares. You'll be attending in his place moving forward. We'll need your approval on major decisions. Every room she walked into felt the same. Eyes on her, measuring her, comparing. Some respectful, some doubtful, some calculating. She learned quickly to sit straighter, to speak slower, to ask fewer questions out loud. But inside, she was overwhelmed. One evening, after yet another long meeting, Uche sat alone in her father's office. His chair, his desk, his silence. She ran her fingers slowly across the polished surface, her chest tightening. I'm not ready for this, she whispered. The room didn't respond. It never did. She leaned back, staring at the ceiling, exhaustion settling deep into her bones. Every decision felt too big.
Every responsibility too heavy. Every step uncertain. It was like wearing a crown that didn't belong to her. Like walking in shoes far too big. And no matter how tightly she tried to hold everything together, there was a quiet fear growing inside her. What if she couldn't fill them? What if she failed? What if someone was waiting for her too? Then one day, out of nowhere, Uzo suggested Uche hand over the reins of all her father's companies to him, so that he could help her handle everything, because obviously she was overwhelmed. Uche immediately responded that it was her father's lifelong dream of handing over his companies to her. I will make Daddy proud, Uche said, and Uzo let go. But the thought had been planted. For the first time in months, joy returned quietly. It started with a small realization, a missed cycle, then another. Uche sat on the edge of her bed, her hands trembling as she stared at the test in her palm. When the truth settled in, she let out a soft, disbelieving laugh, one that quickly melted into tears. I'm pregnant, she whispered. The words felt fragile, beautiful, alive. When she told Uzo, his reaction was everything she didn't know she needed.
His face lit up instantly, his eyes softening as he pulled her into his arms. Uche, he breathed, holding her tightly. You've made me the happiest man alive. And just like that, light returned. The house changed. Laughter echoed again. Vivian cried tears of relief. already talking about baby names and nursery colors. Even the staff moved with a different kind of energy, gentler, warmer, and Uche felt whole again. She would rest her hands on her stomach sometimes, smiling to herself, imagining a future that didn't feel so heavy, something pure, something hers. Uzo became even more attentive, more present. He checked on her constantly, made sure she ate, made sure she rested. One morning, just as the sun began to rise, Uche stirred awake to the soft sound of the door opening. She turned slightly. Uzo walked in, holding a tray. Tea, carefully prepared. She smiled sleepily. "You know we have staff for this." "I know," he said gently, setting it down beside her. "But I wanted to." There was something intimate about it. Simple, intentional. He handed her the cup himself, watching as she took the first sip. "You need to take care of yourself," he said softly, "for us." Uche's heart warmed. Even with everything, he chose to do this himself. It felt like love, pure love. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. He kissed her forehead before leaving for work, and she watched him go, smiling. Later that afternoon, Uche stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her outfit. She had a meeting to attend, one she couldn't afford to miss. She felt good, strong, normal. But as she turned to pick up her bag, she froze. A strange sensation. Then warmth. Her heart skipped. Slowly, she looked down. Blood. Her breath caught instantly. No, 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 no. Panic surged through her body as her hands began to shake. "Help!" she cried out, her voice breaking. Within minutes, the house was in chaos. Her driver rushed her to the hospital, her mind spiraling, her hands gripping her stomach as if she could somehow hold everything together. "Please," she whispered over and over. "Please be okay." By the time Uzo arrived, she was already being attended to. The hours that followed felt endless.
Cold, silent. And then the doctor walked in. One look at his face and Uche knew. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "We did everything we could." Her world collapsed, just like that. Gone. The joy, the hope, the future she had already begun to love. Gone. Tears streamed down her face as she stared blankly ahead, unable to process the weight of it. Uzo held her, his arms tight around her trembling body. "It's okay," he whispered. "We'll try again." But Uche didn't respond, because this wasn't something you simply tried again. This was something that had lived inside her, something she had already become attached to. The doctor continued gently. "You'll need to be more cautious moving forward. Avoid stress, take only prescribed substances, and ensure everything you consume is properly monitored." She nodded faintly, barely hearing him. Hours later, discharged and exhausted, Uche walked slowly toward the car with Uzo by her side. The world outside felt distant, muted. She sat quietly in the passenger seat, staring out the window as the car moved. Nothing made sense anymore. Nothing felt real. Then, her phone vibrated. She glanced down weakly. A message from the doctor. Her brows furrowed slightly as she opened it. And then, her entire body went still. Her breath caught in her throat. The message was short, but it changed everything. "Mrs. Okafor, please be very careful. The test results showed traces of poisoning." Uche's fingers tightened around her phone. Slowly, very slowly, she turned her head and looked at Uzo, sitting right beside her.
A warm shout out goes to Antoinette, watching from South Africa, Sheila watching from USA, and Jennifer watching from Memphis, Tennessee. Leave me a comment telling me your name and where you're watching me from.
I'll love to give you a shout out in my next video. Back to the story. On a day that started off like every other day, Uche called her husband to remind him of a meeting they were supposed to have together. Please remember we have a dinner with the CEO of Cozy Homes, Uche said, blowing a kiss to her husband before hanging up, or so she thought. She dropped the phone on the bed and rushed to the bathroom to turn off the running tap. She had wanted to soak in a warm bubble bath. When she returned, she heard a voice. Her husband was still talking, but the warmth was gone. His tone was cold, like ice. She realized the call was still active. As she reached down to end it, she heard the one statement that would shatter her world forever. The dinner is at 7. I want her gone the moment we arrive. Make sure it looks like a robbery gone wrong. I want just a single strike to my upper body. Make sure it's a flesh wound. Do not miss your chance.
Everything must look perfect. Uche ended the call immediately. Her hands trembling, her heart pounding. She wasn't just in danger, she was married to it. You don't want to miss part 2, where love, betrayal, and danger collide. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you're the first to see what happens next in Uche's story.